Hello again, my friends. Welcome back to Carpo's channel. That's me. Or Joshua. Or hippie dude, or tree hugger, or whatever other term might suit you. I've tried to start this video twice. I actually have to leave in 20 minutes to pick up my son from school. And that ended up tying in perfectly with the discussion and the topic of this video, which is Stoicism. Now, the first time I started, I had a bunch of flies buzzing around my head, so I moved. Then my dog started clawing at the door, and I thought, well, these are natural things you can just leave in or edit out of a video. But as soon as I felt that frustration creeping in, I laughed at myself and let it go. I believe it was Seneca, a famous philosopher, who said, "We suffer more in our minds than we ever do in reality." And that quote has really stuck with me over the years. And it rings absolutely true. We're constantly worried about what might happen, what could happen, our fears, the what ifs. We've seen people die, so we fear that others are going to die. And guess what? They are. We fear failure because we've seen ourselves and others fail. And guess what? We will fail again. The idea of Stoicism is not really about what practice you have. It's about how you practice your reactions. You can never change fate. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. The more we worry about the what ifs, the more it just haunts us as individuals. Manifests itself as fear, anxiety, depression. Letting go of those things is more difficult than just saying, oh, I'm not going to care anymore. It's a practice. We tend to focus on the extremes in things, whether it comes down to a news story, a media article, or we're looking at a certain religion and we're looking at the extremists within that religion, which we've seen a million times. We tend to ignore the much wider swath of people who are just living their lives. But we focus on the extremes, and that pulls us into this way of thinking that we fear the worst. This can really hold us back when we start to distrust all people. Now look, there are a lot of crappy people out there. I've met plenty of them. There are human beings out there who do things so disgusting I can't even believe they can get away with it. Whether societally or in their own minds. Some of the things people do to other people, or do for their own personal gain, are just so horrendous that you can only walk away shaking your head. But most people just live an average life. The thing about Stoicism, and I want to make this a relatively short video because I've got to go in a bit and because I'd probably ramble on too long. We have to acknowledge what we can control and what we can't control. It's the first step in understanding the Stoic mentality. And I've said this before, I call it the circle of control, the circle of influence. There's a circle of things you can actually change in your life. And it's kind of like the person who complains about a president but has no idea who their own governor or mayor is. Who doesn't look locally because it's easier to complain about the big picture than to actually take action and do something. And so, in a Stoic mindset, the idea is to let things go, to realize that people perceive things the way they do, and that's their unique perspective. Not to get upset and angry about the way the world is, because it's not going to change just because you want it to. This doesn't mean that we can't change things in our circle of control. However, sometimes years later we realize maybe the changes we wanted to make weren't the right changes. Enjoying life, I believe, is based on experiences and not stuff. A Stoic person knows that you can buy as many sports cars as you want, as many mansions as you want, and they can be lost. The things that we want to build in ourselves are those things which cannot be taken away from us and cannot be lost. Those are our values. Nobody can take that away from you. You can imprison a person and beat them senseless, but if they're hanging on to their faith or their thoughts or their ideals, then there's not a lot you can do past a certain point. It takes a certain amount of stoicism to even make it through something like being imprisoned during war, or being imprisoned at any time, for that matter. It's important to realize that happiness is just a perspective. It's just unique to each individual, and often people will carry a plastic smile but be utterly devastated inside. Whereas some people may just look like they're upset all the time, but be some of the happiest people on earth because they don't have to fake their emotions. There are 4 aspects to Stoicism that I want to leave you with. They are wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Wisdom is obvious. It's the ability to gather information, make assessments on that information, and as we age, we gain wisdom. You cannot learn wisdom. It has to be experienced. There are certain things we can learn from others who have gained wisdom, but until we put that into action ourselves, it's difficult to know if that's the truth or not. It's kind of like learning how to do a job by reading about it. Until you actually have hands-on experience, it's difficult to say you can actually do it, right? So there's wisdom, and then there's courage. And that's courage. Along with courage comes persistence. It's not just the courage to save somebody from drowning or to stand up for others or even to, take the plunge on a new career or a new path on life. Courage is persistence, being able to endure through this and be strong-minded and strong-willed. The next one is temperance, which really comes down to how you handle yourself, your demeanor, how you talk with others, how you interact with people. It's okay to be angry sometimes. It's okay to be sad. Stoicism has nothing to do with abandoning emotion. In fact, that is the very last thing that I would want to do. Because the minute you lose your emotional grasp on how you feel about things, you lose it all. People can easily get swayed out of their emotions. Unfortunately, with the vast amount of antipsychotics and antidepressant pharmaceuticals being passed around, many of these mask people's emotions, and they are like a blank slate. Their lips barely move, and something to be aware of, that eliminating emotion is not part of Stoicism. You can still react and feel the way you want to feel. Well, the way you do feel, but like I said, it's how you carry yourself that really matters. And it's all comes down to moving forward. Marcus Aurelius is a wonderful philosopher that is well worth listening and reading. I should say reading, you can't listen to him. But many of these ancient philosophers, when I was doing my philosophy obsession for a few years, I would listen at work all day long. Everybody was listening to the job site radio, and I'd wear my headphones instead and listen to these great courses series where each one would be a different philosopher. It took me a few years to realize that there is no philosopher that is the philosopher. There's no philosopher that has it all figured out, nor any that I agree with completely. Every person has different aspects, even Nietzsche and the idea of nihilism. Once it's carried forward and you understand what it really means, it's not a negative thing. We are far too predisposed to allow society to tell us when to be angry, what we should be mad about, who we should be mad at. And that's changing quickly. Not to bring in the cliche idea of the internet's changed everything, but we're going through some growth pangs right now as a society to become a more stoic society as a whole. Because it's not just the individual. We can have stoic communities. In fact, in many places we already do. We just don't realize it. Thanks for listening. I hear the sirens starting up. That's my cue. What a beautiful day.